Today, in this video series called Diamond Discussions, we will chat with varying artists, our diamonds in the rough. And today on Diamond Discussions, our diamond in the rough is Robin Elizabeth. Robin, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. So to set the tone for the audience, I encountered Robin's work via Facebook, but mostly with YouTube. She had released a series of videos, which we'll have links to in the description, and she's going to tell you more about. But I found them to be simultaneously super hilarious, but also extremely well written. So yeah, Robin, tell us about yourself and your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Yes, I'm Robin Fitzgerald. I'm a writer and an actor, and I created a show called Fitz and Friends that I started about a year and a half ago, where I write based on events like either from like my work or real life events. Um, Things like that I used to do, the fact that I have a terrible singing voice, along with absurdity and bad situations. And then I cast my actor friends. And it's been a blast. And I'm in this season 2, and I have about 6 more episodes to work through. And then my next thing is a pilot that I'm working on writing, and I'll do that next.
Oh, that's wonderful. We busy. But tell us more also about this video series, because I found it to be simultaneously very, like I said, very funny on the surface, but then immediately realized, and maybe I just looked too deep into things, maybe because I'm a big, I don't know, Carl Sagan fan, and I'm kind of like always introspective. I don't know. But my point is, I recognized immediately that you had some messages that you were conveying through the humor that were you know societal lessons, I would say. But could you tell us more about that?
For sure, absolutely. I'm also a social worker, and I've always been a bit of like a justice warrior, equality, things like that. So, I there is like one episode where it was based on real life work events where I kind of, you know, uh, experiencing like sexism in the workplace. And so, that's in one episode. And then Black Lives Matter is just a very important topic and movement that came up. And I think, obviously being a white woman and having all these Karen videos show up are absolutely horrifying and humiliating. So kind of wanted to play that role and get that out there and really let people see it from that point of view and that perspective, while educating on why this is important. And hopefully people could kind of put themselves in their shoes and hopefully not feel attacked, but more like, oh, I didn't really think of it or look at it from that particular situation. And then also using humor to go along with it. And then, in this last episode, taking on kind of how women can be very critical of other women. And as being a therapist part-time, just kind of putting that into the role of the therapist, who someone comes in for help, and instead of, empowering them and guiding them, you're kind of, being very critical and manipulative and things like that. So
I completely resonate. Like I could see how, and, I've done my own fair research about mental illnesses, and I've experienced that with not only friends but associates and whatnot, and just I feel like education is really important. But I resonate that, like, it's true that the wrong people giving the certain people advice who are vulnerable, it could be massively more destructive rather than healing if the situation wasn't taken care of in a correct and more what's the right way, judicious kind of manner. I think I've seen that before too with therapy. I used to have a friend who went to therapy, and I almost want to say it felt like they were worse later. They were seemingly more confident, but it became arrogance and a sort of a sense of entitlement and anger. And I was very surprised by that, because they had never been that way before. And I realized only over time that the therapy was likely involved. I couldn't be for sure on it, but right, I think I resonate with what you're saying, is that sometimes it's possible that therapy can actually be a detriment to people, but kind of unbeknownst to them.
just like there are bad lawyers, politicians. I mean, you definitely want to be careful and find like someone who's a good fit for you. And you know, people can be very manipulative in those roles, and that's really scary. Because someone is coming to you who trusts that you're going to help them and make them better. So part of it, I mean, part of a role of a therapist is you want to empower the person that's coming in. So of course, you know, sometimes you'll give advice, or sometimes but mostly you're supposed to empower people and tell them what you objectively observe about them and their situations or patterns or things like that. But it's not really like telling someone what to do. So, you know, if someone finds themselves in a situation where it's like, you have to do this, or unless they're strongly encouraging you to get out of a dangerous situation,
exactly.
If you are in an abusive relationship or something like that. But other than that, if it seems like they're kind of forcing you to make decisions that, you know, they would make, that's not good.
Yeah, what you said makes a lot of sense too about that subject, that, you know, there's bad lawyers, there's bad, you know, carpenters, there's bad, you know, politicians, you name it, bad actors, everything. And it's something that I think a lot of people don't really ever take into consideration for certain roles in society. They just, for example, some people will just take doctors' points of view at face value. And I'm not trying to say all doctors are evil, Dr. Evil. It's not like that. Just like all actors aren't bad. In fact, some of them, depending on the condition in which some people are placed, they might actually be great at their job, but if they're placed in the wrong conditions, they could be in, you know, a terrible position to give advice or to do anything. And I feel the same goes for like writing and pretty much every profession. You just have to do the checks and balances and be like, wait, you know, can I constantly just keep making assessments about the advice being given to me or whatever? And if you find it to be bad advice, even if it's from a good person, that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, they're terrible. It just means you made a conscious decision to realize this advice that was given to me from an expert is not right, maybe for me, or maybe it's not right at all. Maybe it's just bad science, something that we obviously have been seeing quite a bit of given this COVID-19 situation. There's quite a bit of science on one side where people will say something and then you can only then go and realize that it's not true at all. There's no actual data to support certain things. And so I feel like it's really important to approach your life that way, whether it's about acting or writing or therapy.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Yeah. You're in everything you do, you're going to get advice from people. I feel like the most for me was when I did come here and start being an actor and writer and things like that, probably more than any other field. But even in any field, anything you start, you will get sort of unsolicited opinions and advice all the time. And exactly, you have to filter through. You can't take everyone's feedback. I love getting feedback on my work, and it was harder for me at the very beginning than it is now. Now I can get it and I can take it in and say, oh yeah, I never thought of that. That's, you know, good point. Or yeah, I hear what they're saying. That's not really what I'm going for though. Do you know what I mean? Like you can kind of make your own.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you brought that up, because as a writer, especially writing Diamond Dragons here, which it originally began as a screenplay, and I developed it from 2018 to 2019. And I only wrote the book basically August to September of 2020. And then of course, I'm editing it and so on. But throughout these years, I've, of course, put some, you know, scenes. Hey, can you read a little bit of that? Tell me what you, show me something, tell me what you think, etc. And I agree with you entirely. I kind of built my own system where it's like in terms of interpreting people's thought process. One, you can accept input outright. You can be like, oh my gosh, that's a fantastic idea. I'm so glad you brought it up. Thank you. And you just implement it straight up and you don't really think twice about it. Two, you can reject it outright for whatever reasons. People don't have to know why. And then three, you can kind of do a hybrid where you ever gotten advice, right, Robin, where you're like, oh, that's pretty good advice. I don't like that one thing that she said, but oh my gosh, this point is fantastic. So you sort of, you know, do a hybrid where you're like, wow, 50% of what they said I don't agree with, but the other 50% is fantastic. I definitely need to do that. And then the fourth one is what you just mentioned there, which you could be like, huh, that's a really good point, but not applicable and somewhat non sequitur to my particular work in this particular case. And so, although it's a great idea, it just doesn't belong in this story or this particular aspect of my life. And that's, I find that very difficult for some people to get over. Like they'll be so hungry about, oh, but Robin, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. And then when you don't, they're like, what was wrong with you? And they never can step back and realize, well, that was a good idea, but it's just one of many good ideas. And maybe it didn't apply, but the only reason they thought that you had to do it was simply because they felt so strongly about it. And that's kind of the difference between art and things like math and science. You know, math and science, there are, you know, definitive reasonings for things. With art, it's just like anything else. I know tons of people who didn't like the movies, the Matrix movies, or they don't like Star Wars, or they don't like Harry Potter, or they don't like the Lord of the Rings. And for me, I wonder why. They were all great. But we all know that people have opinions, and some people will be like, I don't like Star Wars. I'll be like, oh yeah, why is that? I don't like science fiction, space and stupid lasers. I'd be like, oh, so you wouldn't be satisfied with anything that came with science fiction. They're like, nope, I hate it. And I'm like, okay, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're right or wrong. It just means that's it. That's their opinion, you know?
Completely. I completely agree. And it's like that with comedy. Sometimes it's not people's thing, you know, or different types of comedy they like or don't like. So sometimes you're just not going to, you know, sometimes you're just not going to be what they're looking for. But I still love to get feedback, like you were saying, because you never know. Like you never know if it might be something that will help you grow, and if it's not, that's okay too. And exactly like when it's flipped for me, like if I'm an actor on something, I might have an idea and think something's a great idea, but essentially that person who's creating it just has the say. That's like what's wonderful and what's so tough about being an art, about creating art in any way, is that it's completely subjective. And that's what's hard about it, because there's no right and wrong, and that's also what's amazing about it. So when I'm like an actor on something and I have an idea and the director might not want to go with it, because I create my own stuff, I'm much more like, oh, that's totally fine. That's cool. Because I understand that this is your thing and it's your creation. And when it's my creation, I make what I want, you know?
Yeah, no, I completely resonate. Like I said, you know, Rob and I were talking a little bit before we, you know, recorded that, you know, I've produced and directed some of my own projects, and although it's a collaborative process, as we know, and that's one of the best things that makes theater performance and film a great thing, that it has all this input from all these different people. At the same time, being the director or the creator is sort of a holy thing, that you're sort of like, well, those are great ideas, but I'm not going to implement them because I have a particular vision in mind. And it also just relates to the fact that you know, you can take almost any film, and this has been argued many times before, and I just hope more people think about it critically, that if you take any film, like let's take a screenplay, and then you give it to director X, and they direct it, and then they shoot their movie, you could give that same script to someone else, the same screenplay to someone else, and let's pretend for all intents and purposes that this other director has never seen the other person's work. They might cut a completely different film with completely different pacing. Maybe the music style, maybe one was orchestrated music and the other one was sort of sci-fi, like electronic, you know, music. Maybe the actor that they cast for the lead, you were like, wait, they cast Danny DeVito? The other guy cast, I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know? And you'd be like, why is that? I don't know, but the whole point being is that, like you said, art is very subjective. And another good point of view is, I don't understand why people can't apply theater a little bit more to film. And let me explain, is that it's true that most films don't really always get remade many times. But when you take plays like Romeo and Juliet, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of iterations, we'll call it, have been created, whether or not brought to the screen. But independent of that, I mean, I think I want to say I've seen at least 5 productions of Romeo and Juliet in my lifetime. And of course, they all had different actors and different directors and different sound and music and sets and costumes and lighting. And they were all very interesting productions. And I don't think I would say that any given one of them was just like awful and just, oh, what a tragedy. Pardon the pun.
Exactly, exactly. And it's cool to see different different minds, different takes on that world.
That's why we have different minds. If we all had the same mind, we'd all make the same productions. Yeah.
Yes. And how boring would that be?
Yeah. So tell us more also about the process that you found in creating these wonderful videos.
Yeah, the process is it's like starts with like an idea or event or something that happened to me, and then I just get writing, and then I just get writing, and then I'm like, okay, I just take everything one step at a time. Then like, what could production look like for this? Where could I film this? I start going from there. Who could I cast? Which of my friends like would be good for this, or should I reach a little bit outside of the pool? Like, what would this look like? And for this last one that I released is called Moving On. It was a sequel. I knew that my friend Charlotte, who was in the first season, there is an episode, season 1, episode 5, where I set her up, and it's sort of a surprise. She ends up with, it's kind of a surprise. And then I was thinking, how can I follow that up? We kept thinking like, we had so much fun. We're going to do it again. We're going to work together again. But, the surprise of it was really like the joke. So we can't you really have to kind of be creative on where you want to go from there. So then I thought like, I'm going to be your therapist. Let's do like a critical woman, kind of bad therapist kind of thing. And then we'll follow up on that surprise with another surprise. We'll take a small surprise and make a big surprise in this one. So
Well, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant, and I thought it was some of the best stuff that I've seen on YouTube for a while. And I'm not just saying that simply because we're doing the discussion here, but I found it to be really interesting. I hope the audience is going to check those things out. And I resonate because again, me putting together some of my own live productions. I find that the process is actually more fun than the execution. What do you think of that?
yeah, yes. I guess.
Well, we don't have to agree. I'm just simply saying, like, that's how
No,
yeah.
I'm thinking. The wheels are spinning. I never thought of it that way. Okay, so I think I do like the execution, but the process is what's really fun. It's collaborate. It's especially getting to work with people that are your friends or people that you just love working with, and you have that kind of work chemistry, that acting, chemistry with, and you just have fun. And what I do is, because I direct these as well, is how I direct them is usually in the rehearsals. So it's usually like I have a vision for what I want, and I write it, I send it over and say, what are your thoughts? What are your ideas? I like the actors to give as much input. I want to know where they're coming from and how they view it. And they always give valuable input and like make changes. And we end up like improving different roles. But that's where I find is the rehearsal, because usually I do book, I'll book something for a set, that we're filming for a certain time frame, and it's usually in that rehearsal that I'm like, okay, I like this, I don't like this, I think this will work better, and that's kind of where all the direction happens.
Yeah, like I think the process is always the place where you have to think on your feet. One of the best skill sets that a human being can have and possess and sort of nurture and enrich and grow is the ability to stay calm under great duress. Because it's so easy for people to be like, oh my gosh, what is it? Oh, we just lost our venue. And then suddenly everybody's like, and you're like, okay, we got to deal with that. Or, hey, the main actor called and they're moving and they're moving in a hurt, like they're off the production, they can't do this thing anymore. Or like in my case, certain equipment failures, or just weird janky things that monkey wrenches in the system and whatnot. And
Completely.
so it's always the director's it's on the onus of the director to solve those problems. And I'm sure that
Mhm.
you've had to encounter that being a director, would you say?
Yes. Yep. There's usually always something. But I think I find that as I move along, like from episode one, season one, to just being, shot in my apartment. A close friend of mine used to just DP and kind of just did it. But then once I wanted to grow, everything was growing a little bit. Okay, sound, and then we'll get this, and then production started to grow. Yeah, something always comes up. Like there was one episode where the sound person, I think it was the night before we were shooting at like 9 a.m. or maybe 10 a.m.
It's always the night before, isn't it?
Yes, it was like midnight, and he's like,
Right.
I don't have equipment anymore. And I'm like,
You're like,
what?
great.
So yeah, so I have the venue booked. I have actors coming, and this was one where I had a lot of actor like extras that I needed for like an audience. It was season one, episode 7, and it's kind of like me and this actor are in an act based on a real acting class that we were in, and just kind of if you've ever seen the show Barry, it's also kind of like, ever seen the show Barry on HBO with Bill Hader?
It sounds familiar. Yeah, that's right, Bill Heather. I haven't, but I know a friend who would probably get a big kick out of that because they love Bill. Is it Bill Hader, right?
Bill Hader, he's
Yeah.
yeah. I love him. Yeah. So it was one. It was based on that. It was like basically acting classes in the Valley. And I know you said you may. I don't know if you've ever taken any or if you know, but they are kind of. It's like the show Barry, where it's really like the
I'm aware.
the instructor. Okay, so it's just kind of like. Are you an instructor in the Valley? Am
I'm
I?
not an instructor of acting at this
Okay.
point. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, but what I'm saying, Robin, is I think we're both painfully aware that it kind of relates to something we were talking about earlier, which is there are good instructors and good people in their professions. There's good plumbers. There's great plumbers. There's phenomenal plumbers. And some people will say, what's the big deal with that? I'm like, seriously, if you haven't met someone who really takes their craft and makes it into a true art, then you haven't lived yet, to meet someone who's fantastic. But it permeates every possible thing you can imagine, and most certainly acting and theater and performance. And so yeah, I'm aware that there's probably plenty of acting coaches out there, and I probably encountered a good portion of them that who just probably shouldn't be doing the things that they're doing.
Yeah,
But
like
it
it's
is
like
what it is, and everybody's out there trying to do what they're trying to do. I would say some of them probably believe themselves, and other ones they might actually be trying to weave we'll call it a spell over people and say, hey, as long as I tell them what they want to hear, then I get the money, and I
exactly. No, there are hands down some great acting coaches and instructors for sure. There was one in particular, a class that we were in that was like, pretty much hit all the diagnostic traits for narcissistic personality disorder, like
great.
to a T. So it was like us in that, and then also exploring the world of exaggerating the world of actors diving into characters where like there sometimes like absolutely as an actor you really need to dive into some of these characters of these more dramatic or dark. Sometimes though, I guess from my perspective, like a light comedy like You've Got Mail or something, you probably don't need to dive in super so sometimes like it was just you would get like there were people that like I have to do all of this text analysis on Meg Ryan and You've Got Mail, stuff like that. So it was kind of we were kind of having fun with that. And then So anyway, there was an audience of actors watching us perform this completely silly, ridiculous thing that we ended up doing for the class.
That's awesome.
And anyway, it was that set in that day where the sound person. So it wasn't some of mine. I just have two. There's me and another actor, and that's it. So this one, there were a lot of people coming. There's set and whatever. I'm like, okay, be nice and listen to this person and be kind, and they are coming from a situation and they are, we just need to problem solve, and okay, let me see what I can do. So I anyone I knew that did sound, like, hey, do you borrow equipment? I can, pay you or whatever. And
you have to think on your feet sometimes. I agree.
Exactly. And then, we ended up problem solving. But yes, any of those things can happen, and you're like, all right, just gotta problem solve. And make sure that, for me, I guess I think being not even when we're stressed and your instinct is to, maybe not be nice, just thinking of, okay, that person's in a situation, and then also at the end of the day, I want a good product. And I'm not gonna get a good product if I'm mean to somebody. And also, you know what I mean?
I agree. You catch more bees with honey, and not to mention, it's just be a good human being. I mean, it's one thing when things go wrong, but you don't have to be a jerk about it. I mean, for example, there was plenty of instances in my dealings as a director of my own projects mostly, but where I had to tell people, like, look, I got to talk to you for a minute, like, you were late for this, you didn't do this, you haven't really been putting effort into this stuff. I don't think it's working out. I'm not going to be bringing you aboard for any of these other future projects, okay? And then when I handle it that way, they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, and da-da-da. I'm like, that's okay. It's just like, it just seems overwhelming for you, right? Have you been overwhelmed? And they're like, oh yeah, I've got all this going. And I feel like it's a better way to enter it, instead of coming in like, here's the thing, you're late, you're this, get the heck out of here. Like, that's
right.
We don't handle it like Al Pacino in the movies. Al Pacino's a nice guy, right? But when he plays movie characters, he's going to be a little crazy. And the same probably with Bobby De Niro, right? They're not actually these psychotic people, It's like, I think people get too up in arms about how you should treat it when things don't work out. It's like, just tell them, look, it's not working out, good luck, as opposed to making it into a dramatic situation, which only belongs on the stage or in film, right? It's not something that needs to happen with real life human beings, because we all have different things going on, and the earth is all we have. As Carl Sagan said, the earth is the only planet that harbors life. There is nowhere else that we can go to save us from ourselves. So
exactly,
we might as well treat each other the best that we can, even if things don't work out. And that's fine. There's other human beings, like you said before. You throw a rock in any direction, you're going to find another actor or another sound guy or whatever. It doesn't mean we want to get rid of people like nothing, but if it doesn't work out, stop forcing it.
Completely, yes. But also, like, before the production, I you know what I mean? Like, especially before the production, you have to, like, have an era that, like, or, an aura, like that, everyone is, it has to be like, otherwise people don't want to work with you.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be fun.
Precisely.
So even when stressful things come up, like, you just, are working through it. So anyway, long story short, didn't work with that person again, but I was very nice in the problem solving, and then was just very honest after the production.
Yeah. That's all there is to it. I agree with you in full. So another question, what do you think, Robin, in your opinion, is your worst artist's habit?
Okay, I think I can be, like, meticulous sometimes. Like if things, like, a certain way, and as to an extent. At the same time, like, I always have fun. Like, it's always fun. But I think I definitely, for, like, at least, like, my production and, like, small production, I do everything. Like, I'll plan everything.
That makes sense. That's a good answer. It could be simultaneously a strength too. And on that note, so what do you think is your best, artist's habit?
Always including the actors in every, like, asking for their input, asking what they think about this, asking for their voice, letting them know that, like, I'm not married to certain things, and there's a lot of like open to suggestions that they have, and then having fun. I think those are
That's,
the
I love that too. And then, other than being on this show, what's the worst advice you've ever been given?
other than being
Gotcha.
I think that other than the show, like the Fitz and Friends show. Um, the worst advice. I know I've been given bad advice for sure. Bad advice. I was thinking back to that acting class that I was in here, and I remember the instructor, like, your arms. You should, like, cover your arms or something. I remember, like, he didn't have any notes on the acting, but like other things.
Well, that's okay. I can always skip it too, you know.
Or it'll come to me.
Yes. For you, what's the best advice that you have to, struggling artists out there, writers, actors, whatever you think? What's the best advice you give them?
Your authenticity is your gold. So I think writing from you and parts of you, it doesn't have to be anything that just comes from you or inspires you. I think that is what really, like, shines and comes out even as yourself as a performer as well. And that's what's going to make you stand out. That's what makes you unique. So use it. Use whatever you love. Think of, like, who inspired you to be an actor or a writer, and what do you like about them? And it's not for the sake of copying them, but sometimes it's finding, like, what did I really like about Seth Rogen? He's so vulnerable and likable in his characters, and why is that? Because do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's
100%. I mean,
really
yeah, like, I mean, inspiration and homage. I mean, I would personally say that every piece of art anybody has ever placed out there into the world has some input that has come from other sources that are not actually the person who made it. For example, even when you think of Star Wars, some people think, oh, wow, George Lucas is a genius. And he is, and he was. But the point being is, he borrowed from so many different things that would make most people's heads spin. Some people know certain aspects of what he borrowed from, but not all of them. And if people actually did the research, they'd realize that he was homaging so many different things, also with Indiana Jones, that it would make their heads spin. And I don't think it came from the idea of, oh, well, this made a lot of money, I think I'll go ahead and copy it. It's not that. He was just so inspired. I mean, even Spielberg would talk about the same thing, when he would work with George Lucas, that they were just trying to do stuff that they found incredible when they were kids. And so that means there were influences that occurred. And I will say that the same thing happened to me with Diamond Dragons. There are so many influences from so many different levels of art. Again, it would make people's heads spin, and I won't get into all of them. But I want to say this, Robin, that line you said was brilliant. I hope people remember it. You said, your authenticity is your gold. And that's a great line. You got to use that in your stories, because it's 100% true. I think for any artist, it's like when people lose their authenticity, when they lose their genuineness, whether for acting or for writing or directing or music, singing, whatever, that's when it becomes stale. And let's be honest, most people don't want to see that. Nobody wants to see you fake it. Nobody wants to see you pretend that you just lost your wife in a tragic car accident, that you witnessed her being hit by a car. Nobody wants to see that on film. I mean, it's painful to watch someone cry fakely or faking it. It's painful because you feel, right? And that actually is not just with the camera, but it can be through the words on the page. It can be through a painting. When you really touch people's souls, that's what counts, So I agree. I think you got to keep that line. I might steal it. Your gold is your authenticity, or your authenticity is your gold.
Completely. No, I completely agree. And I think, yeah. And I think just that. And I think sometimes less is more. I've heard, like you were saying, it's really painful to watch people fake cry. I agree. And I think sometimes what is told to actors, or what seems to be, is if you can cry, or if you can get really angry, that's a win. No, like if that, try to, like, you know, if you really try to invest in those circumstances and like what is natural for you. And sometimes you do need to exaggerate what's natural for you.
Right.
But I think like the best like starting point is like, what would that be like for you? And you know, when I work with actors, I love to ask them and see, and sometimes they have a take that I wasn't thinking initially. But
Exactly.
I love when it plays out for them, and I'm like, yeah, that, yep,
That's
there
why,
it is.
you know, to kind of capitalize on another thing about with screenwriting is you don't want to say Julia cries at this moment, because you don't know if the actress is going to get there. And that doesn't mean it's bad if she doesn't. What it means is it's possible that all the things that led up to that moment just didn't lead to crying. Because what we're not looking for are tears or is anger. What we're looking for is, does the situation drive up that from your soul and make you do that? And actually, another point to make with it is different actors have different vulnerability levels. And I'm not saying that every actor needs to uh, uh, just sometimes put up a shield and not be vulnerable. What I'm trying to say is some people will burst into tears at certain levels of, you know, dramatic tension, and other ones you could see the tension on their face, but maybe they wouldn't be um, what's the word for it? Really, you know, wild with the tears or whatnot. So it's just different. That's why, again, it all comes back to being genuine. It's not about crying. It's not about being angry. It's about literally going through the situation and being like, how do you really feel? Well, let's see that. Just do that on camera. And that's simultaneously the easiest and the hardest thing to do in the world.
Exactly. 1000%. Like that's it. That's, you said it. No, really, I mean, really. And because it's like, you might, when you're writing something, you might think, because sometimes we're thinking from ourselves too. You might think like, wow, I would be really freaked out in that situation. The episode I was talking about with my friend with the little surprise, I was thinking I would be freaked out if I were the other person. I would think there's something wrong with this person. I'm kind of afraid. And that wasn't her take on it. And you just never know. And it's just great to see someone's genuine response, or something, if I'm writing that might make me really upset, it might make someone else cry. And that's, yeah, but that's exactly what you were saying. And I completely agree.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like that's the thing. That's why we're all different as artists, and it can be very difficult to get to the truth of the matter when you're doing something like writing, because you have to appeal to so many people who are going to see the work. And the only way to do that is to try to get the genuine response from the actors and etc. or the situation that most people would resonate with. Because if you create a situation where only say 5% of the population would resonate with, you know, you might end up with people saying, I hated that movie. I hated them. It was so stupid. Oh, they were so fake. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And then maybe you have the other people going, this was the best film I have ever seen in my life. And then people will be going, what's going on? Who's right? And you're like, it's not really who's right. What happened is we have 95% of the world hates this film, but the 5% who like it really like this film, you know? And what do you do with that? I have no idea. It's just, it just shows that there's a great line in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which was with Kevin Costner and Morgan Freeman, where Morgan Freeman played this character Aziz, and he says at one point he has this great line. There's this little kid who asks him, you know, did gold paint your face? Because he's got all these little dots and stuff like that. And at first you can see he's laughing, you know, and then he's kind of like, for certain, you know? And I was like, oh, that's such a sweet line. Like that just tells you everything you need to know, that it's like, you know, like because of the variety out there. And that's another line he had in there. He says, because Allah loves wondrous variety, you know, and you're like, oh, that's great. So it's like, that's what it is out there. The whole aspect of what we're out there doing with art is variety. And it's tough sometimes to have that variety appeal to like 90% of the population.
Exactly.
So
No,
one
I
last
agree.
question, Robin. This has been a great pleasure. It's been so much fun talking with you. Who's the next diamond in the rough? Who would you now subject to my crazy level of questioning?
Oh, Denzel Washington.
I would love him to be aboard. I talk about him all the time with quotes and stuff on these other things. That would be fantastic. Denzel, shout out if you ever hear about this.
You never know. And now, in people searching for things, that Denzel pops up, and there you go.
Well, I
You know,
sure hope so,
still,
and I like that vote of confidence. I like it. I think that's a positive way of looking at it. Maybe we'll be able to get Denzel Washington on the show, right? That would be cool.
Seal has randomly viewed my Instagram stories, so anything is possible.
Oh, well, that's cool. Well, I will say this. Since you mentioned Denzel, I might as well at least say this because you would like this quote. I think everybody would like this quote. And he said it before on a lot of his things because I love a lot of his like motivational speeches that he gives to like colleges and stuff. But he said, "Here's one from my wife. You guys will like this one because, my wife, she's smarter than me and I like her and she's wonderful." And, and he says, "In order to get something you never got, you got to do something you never did." And I'm like, oh, here's the microphone. Boom.
Yeah,
It's a great
he has.
one,
Yeah,
right?
he has a lot of little gems like that, or like luck, or it's like a being prepared for an opportunity, and then luck comes. It's like, or both of those things are what's needed for success, something like that. Being prepared and then
He's
luck.
right. He's 100% right. And on that note, since you mentioned that, like he's got those gems of quotes, that's exactly why we call it Diamond Discussions. And thanks for being on the show, Robin. It's been a pleasure. And we'll see you guys next time on Diamond Discussions.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for watching. Would you like to be a guest on the show, or do you know a diamond in the rough who should? Contact us, diamonddragonstale@gmail.com. Until then, Chiong, Chifoy, Vas Res, and Iye Laha.